All right, very cool. Well, hello there, everyone, and everyone out in our audience. My name is Eric Wehmeyer. I hope we've had the pleasure of meeting by now. I know we have some new Express Maintenance customers and users out there. So I'll introduce myself. I'm the Executive Account Manager for Express Maintenance. And joining me today for the second time is Gary Brown, owner of Manufacturing Asset Solutions. Gary, welcome to the session.
Thank you, Eric. Look forward to being back here and talking and discussing the topics for today. Welcome everybody on the call.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just in case you guys aren't aware, we did another one of these where we just kind of outlined the overall picture of organizational entropy and the journey to optimal asset performance. And you can catch it on our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube, type in Express Maintenance, and you can see all of our training videos and presentations and some of the newest features that come out. We have a features playlist that you guys can check out. And we're updating that all the time. So that's a good resource for you. So Gary, it's been a few weeks since we spoke last, and during our last meeting, you gave us an excellent but brief autobiography of how you came to be the owner and driver of Manufacturing Asset Solutions and Express Maintenance. But now that our audience knows the history behind Express Maintenance, what I'd like you to do now is kind of share with us your vision for Express Maintenance specifically. But before you go that direction, I want our audience to know why I'm starting this conversation with Gary. And the reason is that today we're going to be discussing the first two cultures of the manufacturer's journey to optimal asset performance. And if I was a listener who found myself struggling to make that leap from one culture to the next, I would want to know that I'm talking to a company that not only provides an enterprise asset management software, but that I'm also talking to somebody who's committed to getting their hands dirty and helping me grow through this process. And so we're going to be laying that process out over the next several months as we do more of these. So Gary, what is your vision for Express Maintenance?
Eric, it's really difficult to separate the vision for Express Maintenance from the vision from Manufacturing Asset Solutions because they're almost one. Express Maintenance is a tool, and the tool helps maintenance organizations and facilities to operate better. And assessing where you are in the continuum as the company when you pick up any kind of a tool and put it to use is really important. Coming from a maintenance background, running maintenance engineering for a number of large companies, I fully understand that the biggest battle we have here is the culture. We also have the fact that most maintenance organizations are underfunded and understaffed. So you just have lots of issues coming in there. So my vision and with Express Maintenance and Manufacturing Asset Solutions is to, come alongside maintenance staff, facilities people, to help them, to empower them to be able to do their job well, to allow the facility to produce the products they're trying to produce and to do it successfully, and to also hopefully allow the maintenance people to have a life, because I think a lot of them don't. It's tough, with all the demands placed on them. So.
Yeah, lots of demands and lots of things kind of embedded over the last several decades that just really make the whole culture really hard to overcome. And by the way, guys, if you're listening and you're live right now, feel free to type in that chat box any questions that you have as we're talking. We can address those kind of as we get into the Q&A section. But if you're listening, I hope what you heard is that between Manufacturing Asset Solutions and Express Maintenance, you have the tools and the training and the guidance you need to successfully navigate this journey, and you don't have to do it alone. And I say that because if I could identify the number one reason most enterprise asset management or computerized maintenance management software implementations fail, it's because a company or person who's never done an implementation before attempts to do it on their own, and they get it maybe 20 to 30% correct, and the results 6 to 18 months later cause them to throw their hands up in frustration. They blame the software for being too complicated, and then either give up or start looking for another program. And it's all too common. But people tell me, they say, I've used Express Maintenance for 15 years at the last place I worked, to which I say, that's great. I've been driving the same car for the past 15 years, but that doesn't mean I know how to put one together. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do, Eric. And, you know, historically in working with people to use the software, you first thing you have to realize it's a tool, and all tools have certain requirements for how to use them. And when you're trying to put it together, getting the tool in place is important. And in my experience, that really can take the skills of a maintenance engineer, which is really what I consider myself, working in maintenance engineering, to look at the whole view of the company and the equipment and the processes and the facility support equipment in order to really have a complete picture. And if you add that to the 20 plus years I now have in working with express maintenance and its table structures and its function and its results that you're looking for, you combine those two together, and that's where you can get a successful implementation that doesn't just go to the point where we go live. It goes after that, because I think that we've seen, Eric, that the biggest struggle is not before you go live, it's after you go live. And then how do you adapt and work and have to deal with the cultures you find, because culture change is by far the biggest hurdle anybody runs into. Right. And if you don't prepare for it, then it's going to be a rude awakening for you when you say, hey, I bought this brand new shiny tool, I put all the effort to get it going, but nothing has changed. So that's where the effort really begins.
Yeah, no, I agree. And so, why are we going to be harping on this today? Well, because in this particular episode, we're tackling the first two cultures of the manufacturer's journey to optimal asset performance, which are regressive and reactive. And if you have any ambition to move into preventive or planned or predictive maintenance, or even a world-class environment, then laying a solid foundation with the proper implementation, building one on top of another, making sure the right things and tools and resources and people are in place is going to be your best bet. You would agree with that, wouldn't you, Gary?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, that's the only way you're going to get better. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's get into this. I'm excited about this topic, mainly because I would say that probably 80% of the customers that we deal with struggle with really graduating from reactive to planned. And I firmly believe that if we apply the principles and steps we're getting ready to talk about, we'll be able to confidently and competently make leaps and bounds forward at all the different facilities where we see express maintenance. So let's recap real quick. What you see on your screen is the journey to optimal asset performance. And I want you to notice that on the x-axis, we have the organizational culture, and on the y-axis, we have asset performance. So what we're saying is that there is a direct correlation between the organization's culture and the asset's ability to perform. And so we're going to talk about these different cultures you see here: regressive, reactive, planned, precision, world-class. And what I want you guys, and what Gary and I want you guys to really kind of adopt, if you get nothing else out of this, is adopt this idea of the vision being required maintenance. So today, most people, most manufacturing leaders that we talk to, they see breakdown work as the required maintenance, and preventive maintenance is kind of like an optional thing. Well, we want to bridge the gap between those two and say it's all required, because if we're going to move from one to the other, it's going to take a mind switch and saying that no, preventive maintenance and yes, in breakdown work, they're both required. So and part of that mental switch is what's going to help develop that culture. So we're going to look at regressive and the mentality of what produces a regressive culture, some of the rewards and the fruit of that culture, and then we're going to take a look at reactive, the mentality behind reactive, and what's needed to move from reactive into the plan. So Gary, let me let you take it away, and we'll start off with the regressive mentality.
Well, I think it's pretty apparent when you say regressive, it's going backwards. And it's really talking about the state of your equipment, is that you're not doing the required tasks to keep it functioning, and you're using its productive life up without reinvesting in it. And that's something that we like to call technical debt. You're building up technical debt in your equipment. And the longer you go down that road, you may have some short-term savings from not working on the equipment, but there's so many other things that get impacted by that, such as quality, morale, all those kind of things. Like, how much do you really care for your plant if things are running to failure? And when things fail, you know, the sad thing about failure is when something fails, then and you're running a piece of equipment hard, then what else fails because it breaks or because it failed, and all the cumulative, the cascade of impact. So that's pretty much regressive. It's not a good state to be in, but yet we find people there.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot to say about it, like you said. And I kind of compare this whole plan to what it looks like to walk up a down escalator. I think you've heard me say that before, because if we're not moving forward, if we're not being proactive, then we're gonna continue to regress. And that's this organizational entropy. If we're not pushing forward and leading our maintenance departments in a more proactive push, then it's gonna continue to get worse. And you know, like you said, the regressive really does have this short-term appeal of we're not putting money into it, but it's decaying, and so it just continues to get worse. So let's move on to reactive, Gary.
Well, reactive maintenance is basically it's a little improvement or regressive. You fix it when it fails, and you actually bring it back. A lot of times, you know, I've heard people call preventative maintenance, and then I go in and see what they're doing, and they're doing an overhaul. Preventative maintenance in my world is stop, look, and lube. Pretty much get your people around the equipment, get them to see what's going on, to hear, to smell, to feel, to see. And, you know, that's something that happens in the planned phase. But in the reactive phase here, you're just simply fixing it when it fails, running it to failure. Basically, when you're doing that, you have certain people on your staff. Oftentimes they're turned into heroes because when it breaks, they can come in and fix it. That's great. But you do have a lot of breakdowns. And of course, we all know that when you have breakdowns, you impact culture. And, you know, most of the time we see companies going from reactive to planned, mostly and unfortunately because of compliance requirements. Some government entity or another organization or ISO
Outside
standard,
source,
an aerospace standard comes in and says, hey, we need to see records of your maintenance. And so they're forced to then move from a reactive state to a planned state, which is really for the better of all, because the quality all along the supply chain is then improved for each piece of each part, each component as it's assembled up into a finished product. So
yeah, we move into planned out of reaction, and it really just says a lot about where we are in manufacturing today. And I know some folks on this call who are trying to be proactive, and so what does it take, Gary, to move from this mentality of either regressive or reactive? And what are those fundamental foundations that need to be in place in order for us to check off the boxes that say, okay, we've got this down, we're moving, and we're ready to move into a planned phase?
You know, like you and I both know that all this rests on the shoulders of leadership. No culture changes in a company without leadership, and to go from a reactive to a planned state, to go from regressive to reactive to planned, or any of those, requires good leadership. That's where somebody has observed or understands that there's an issue and that the issue is impacting the overall function of the company from whatever means, and that they have to move forward. And then that understanding has to be flowed down and has to be invested in. They need to put money into because if they keep doing what they're doing, they're going to get the same result. And you know, I was just at a company last week where I came in to do some training, and we determined how out of date the database was and the information that was in it. And we got on a call with the plant leadership, and they said, well, we thought this was just a touch-up. You were coming in for a little touch-up call to help us to train our current staff. And now we find out that basically our data repository is out of date to a great degree. It's not been kept accurate. We're even further out of compliance than we possibly could have been, you know, in the quality side. So it really takes leadership, and then it takes implementation, and then it takes support. You know, we've talked a lot, Eric, about the ground troops only advance when the air support is in place.
That's right.
And so everybody needs a champion on a project, somebody who's willing to invest in it, fund it, and help them to protect them during culture change, because we all know that culture is difficult to change. It takes a lot of focus.
That's right. Yeah, and I bring up this part of the screen here because what you're looking at, guys, is, you know, here's the culture, and then below is what you need in order to move from one culture to another. So, of course, regressive really doesn't take a whole lot of planning or leadership. It's mostly it's all reactive. You're just fixing it after it breaks. or you're just replacing it, want to go and run into failure. Moving reactive does require some management. If you're going to properly track your reactive maintenance, you do need to have a CMMS and an implementation, like Gary said, which includes your asset lists, request services, asset specific parts. You got to have training on the system. You know, one of the analogies I'm using a lot here lately is this vehicle analogy. And, you know, one of the issues that a lot of people are facing right now is labor shortages and attrition. And I'll tell you, to expect to hire somebody and then put them in front of a maintenance management software that's not been built properly would be like me hiring a driver for a race car and then giving them an old beat up vehicle. Or in some cases, some people are trying to say, hey, I'm going to hire the driver and then I want them to build the car. And it's kind of backwards and creates a lot of stress on the people, which in turn leads to stress on the equipment. And that implementation piece, I think, is probably one of the most overlooked pieces of the entire maintenance management lifecycle, and making sure that if this is done correctly, if you have the right foundation, the right equipment, parts, services, employees, workflows, planning and scheduling, then the rest of it just goes a lot more smoothly. It's amazing how many people we talk to. Some of them say, this is the best software that I've ever experienced. The user experience is great. It's really easy to use. And on the other side of that coin is another customer that says, this is the most difficult software I've ever had to use. And ultimately what it comes back to is, how is it implemented? And so this is a very important part. If you find yourselves really struggling to move from reactive to proactive, we should probably talk. We should probably schedule some kind of strategy session to look at how things are currently set up and what needs to be done in order to move your system to be ready to help you progress to the next level. Most of the time we find that there's some fields that are missing some data. There's some steps being skipped, and it's causing more work orders to print than necessary, or too few work orders to print. And so all of these things need to be foundational before you move into planned. And then once you're ready to move into planned, then you start building on these pieces. And these are going to be the things that we continue to talk about in the months ahead as we do more of this. So Gary, hey, thank you so much for laying that out for us. I know over the last 20 years, you've been integral in helping manufacturing businesses all over the United States overcome a lot of these hurdles, but I know it hasn't always been easy.
You know, Eric, also a lot of companies in reactive mode don't even have a CMMS. And therefore they have no history. They have no way to really track what's going wrong and why it's going wrong. They're just reacting to it. So oftentimes that we find them in the state of they are reactive. And when we help them to get into a software to start collecting service history data, then that service history data not only helps them to get out of the reactive mode. If they put PMs in place and predictive in place, then they can also justify capital expenditures, overhauls, all those kind of things, and really understand what it's costing to run their equipment. You know, we've seen it so often that an equipment that's planned to run 20 to 30 years, if you don't care for it in the first 2 to 5 years, it can survive, but after that, it degrades in its performance and function, which pretty much is a waste of the capital you invested in the first place. So,
yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. So, hey guys, if that's you, if you're struggling to move from this regressive to reactive or reactive to plan, and you would like to schedule a strategy session, they're free. It's just where we sit down with you for 30 minutes to an hour, take a look at how you guys are currently doing things, and then give you some steps that you can take to modify the way that you're using the system, modify some of the fields that you're using in order to help you meet your business and operational goals. We'd love to do that for you. If that's something that you're interested in, just type in the chat box to me. Make sure that you send a personal message to me, your email address, or you can email me if you have my email address, and just say, hey, I'd love to schedule one of those strategy sessions, and we'd be happy to do that for you. It's one of the things that Gary and I like to do the most, is just sit down with our customers and say, hey, where are you at? Where would you like to go? And how can we help you get there? So with that, Gary, thank you again for joining us. Thank you to our audience for joining us. And I'm going to stop the recording, but then we're going to open this up for a Q&A.